when I was born at Fort Sanders Hospital, and mom brought me home. My first house was on Robert Huff Road, and I don't really remember that house. And right now, I know it's close to the Hyatt Regency where it was at one time, but wouldn't know how to get there even. I think it's off Riverside Drive, but I'm not sure. While we lived there, I don't know. My family never lived anywhere but in South Knoxville, but that's where they rented a house and I came home. The most sterling things I think I did, my daddy was sort of scared of me and sort of amazed because he'd never been around babies. So he used to sort of hold me on his lap, but usually I picked those times to throw up or go to the bathroom. So that was sort of off-putting to him. But I do remember I had a picture made one time and it was cute. But I had one of my eyes was swollen and they said I had a bumblebee had stung me right before I got my picture made, and I'm allergic to bee stings. So my eye was a little sore. Looked like I'd been in a fight with the neighborhood kid. And then one time I decided I didn't like my hair. So I got hedge clippers, they said, and gave myself a haircut on one side. So you'll see me with bangs that look like they're way up here on one picture I had made because I made a lot of pictures of me. I was the first grandchild on both sides of the family and the first child. So I got a lot of pictures when I was little until others came along. My mother's mother ended up having 20 something grandchildren. And my other grandmother had, I think, 9 or 10. So I got sort of lost in the shuffle, even though I was the oldest. With my grandmother, Jenny, who was my mom's mom, I was always her favorite. I like to tell myself I was anyway. It's sort of like being wittiest. I was my grandmother's favorite. But I can remember going to her house. That was one of my favorite things to do. She had this huge big rambling house on Avenue A, right down from Emmanuel Church. And after I was about, I guess, 3, we moved sort of catty corner to her on A Avenue. I can remember going over and spending the night, and my grandmother spoiled me unmercifully. Anything I wanted to eat, she would make graham crackers and make homemade icing and ice the cookies. And she always had watermelon and she always had cantaloupe. And we would go to the grocery store and she would buy just like 4 or 5 watermelons in the summer. And I would just be amazed, but she loved watermelon. It's one of her favorite things. And she was always cooking. And her house was really big and didn't have air conditioning back in those days. But she had real high ceilings. At night, the windows would all be open all over the house and all the cool air would come in. And then about 8 o'clock, she'd go all over and she'd shut all the windows. And it would stay relatively cool the rest of the day in the summer, except in the kitchen. And she always kept the kitchen door shut. And she would be in there, sweat rolling off of her face, cooking. And everything she made was homemade. There was none of this box stuff that we use now. So she literally cooked constantly. And she was probably one of the best cooks that I've ever known. She taught me a lot about cooking, and that's where I learned to make a lot of my stuff. But she used to make something she called Jenny corn. And that's what my daddy called it. She didn't call it. My daddy called it Jenny corn. And she would cut corn off the cob and freeze it and then fix fried corn at Christmas and things like that. And it was just melt in your mouth. It was so good. But she taught me how to make gravy and how to do everything. Every morning, she always had a meat. She either fried bacon, fried sausage, fried chicken, something. Always made gravy and always made homemade biscuits every single morning of Lottie's life, except when she was in the hospital. She did that because my grandfather was Gordon was a little spoiled. He liked his things when he liked them, how he liked them, and he liked to watch football and eat. And that was about, in that order, what he did. She did everything else. Worked in the garden, planted flowers, cooked, canned, froze. She had an ironer in her kitchen, an old, great big, huge white thing. And my grandmother would iron sheets, pillowcases, underwear. It made no difference what it was. She would use that ironer. And that just always amazed me. But there was nothing better than going upstairs in one of those bedrooms with the trees outside hanging over the window and crawling in those clean sheets that had been ironed. And that was the best sleep in the world. That was really great. Jenny was real active in church. Her dad was a doctor, Dr. Gammon, J.H. Gammon. He's got a bridge named after him on John Sevier Highway right past the water plant. And he was, I guess, a GP, just a regular doctor. but he delivered most of the kids in a certain period of time in South Knoxville. He was the one that delivered their babies, and so everybody knew him. He also ran for the state legislature back when I was probably 8, 9, 10. He was a state representative. And I remember my grandmother, Jenny, and my Aunt Maxie, her sister, and my granddaddy taking me down to Nashville one time when Papa Gammons, which is what we called him, was in I guess the House of Representatives was in session. And they introduced me, the speaker introduced me. And so I got put into the book of the minutes of that meeting and wasn't too impressed with it, but they thought it was just wonderful. And I've never gone back and looked at them. I don't know whether it's even, you still can get those minutes or not, but that had to be like now 65 years ago, ballpark. But my grandmother, my Aunt Maxie thought that was just the best thing since sliced bread, that my name was entered into the book, into the minutes of the Senate or the House of Representatives. We had a really close-knit family. My mother had 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and she was the oldest. My grandmother Jenny was the oldest of all of her siblings, and I was the oldest. And so we had that in common. And then my grandmother and I and my aunt Betty Ann, who's my father's sister, all had the same birthday, November 23rd. And they thought that was really cool that 3 of us that close in the family had the same birthday. So grandmother and I, she was always just special to me. Jenny was just somebody you could go to, and you never did anything wrong. I don't care what you did. You never did anything wrong. I was always the perfect child as far as she was concerned. And I think she sort of felt a little fondness in her heart just because I was the oldest. Not that I was anything special, but I was the first one. So I was the first one she got to take care of and hold. And when I was 6 months old, I had eaten, evidently they gave me some banana pudding that had set out on the table. Used to, when you had family dinners, you had it at lunch. And then after everybody got through, they left all the food on the table and just put a tablecloth over it or something. They didn't put it in the refrigerator like we do now. And I can remember they said I got food poisoning from eating banana pudding that had been sitting out all day in the heat. And they thought I was going to die. I was that sick. And Papa Gammon kept coming over to Jenny's house, grandmother's house, and checking on me all during the night and all during the next day. And she literally took care of me the whole time because she was an LP and a registered nurse. And so she was the closest thing to a doctor if Papa Gammon wasn't there. So she took care of me. So I think that sort of was a bonding experience too. But she was such a treat. She kept Chrissy and Laura when they were little. When I was working, they would get off the school bus and go and stay with her. And they have really good memories. They can tell you about sitting the red stool. Chrissy has that now after grandmother passed away. Chrissy got her stool that used to sit in her kitchen, and she has it at her house. So I'm glad they got to meet her. I wish Emily and Livy and Shelby could have met her too, because she was really, really a special lady. And I think she's had more of an impact on my life than as far as role models than anybody that I can even think of.
You're a whole lot like her. No doubt. You got the same coloring, got the coal black eyes, and great cook. A little bit spoiled too. We're still a little bit spoiled. There's just so many things that have the same traits that she had. And I remember her from church. She was one of our leaders in youth groups at church, and she was the complete package.
She's one of those that you would say, she walk and talk the talk. She really believed wholeheartedly in Jesus and going to heaven. And when she got older, she would just say, she was in so much pain with arthritis. She used to say, I just want to go home. I hurt so bad. I just want to go home. And that was something you knew in your heart that she really, if anybody was ever going to heaven, she was. I don't think I've ever heard her say in her whole, she lived to be 95 or 96. I can't quite remember now. But I don't think in all the time I knew her that she ever had anything bad to say about anybody. If she didn't particularly care for somebody, she'd just sort of give this little roll her eyes and give this little funny smile, but she would never say anything bad about him. I do remember one time she had a little bit of a temper that you never saw very often. That I do remember we used to always go to church. They lived on Johnsonville Highway. They had Granddad had built a house up there next door to his mother, Mama. So they built the house there, and after Mama passed away, grandmother would drive to church there, and that's when Johnsonville ended, right at the water plant. It didn't go back to East Oxley, it just stopped there. So she would drive, and that was a trip in itself to ride with my grandmother. I got my driving skills after her, I think, because we couldn't back or we had trouble going forward as we got older even. But we came home from church one day and it was myself and grandmother and my Aunt Mary Sue, her youngest child, that lived with them for a while. So we came in and grandmother was going to the kitchen and she was going to make lunch. She always fixed a hot dinner, her hot lunch. And granddaddy was in a really, remember he was in an awfully good, an awfully good mood and just laughing and talking. And that was so unlike him. So I couldn't figure out what's wrong. And all of a sudden I heard grandmother say, "Whoa, Lordy, what is going on?" And Mary Sue and I sort of looked at each other because she was like 16 years older. She was an adult, but she was not much older than me. And we sort of looked at each other, and grandmother came tearing out of that kitchen. And granddaddy was sitting in his rocking chair watching the ball game. And she said, "I want to know the meaning of what this is in my freezer." Well, granddaddy, unbeknownst to grandmother, used to like to have a beer or two while we were going to church on Sunday mornings. He never went. And evidently his beer was a little warm, so he put it in the freezer to get it icy cold and drink it down before we got home. And he forgot about it and left it in there, and she found it. I had never seen her. I mean, she was just furious, and it was almost funny because it was so out of character for her to get mad that I saw the humor in it. She saw no humor in anything in that particular case. That was just, he was going straight to hell. No way around it. That was it. He was doomed already. You didn't want to even get close to him because you might get sucked along with him. That's how bad it was. That's the only time I think I ever remember her that angry. But boy, we never found anything else like that in the freezer again. I'll guarantee you that. And I'm surprised he didn't start going to church just to get her off his back because she was relentless. When she was really stirred up, she was relentless. I wouldn't want to get my bad side at all. I can remember Gran and my grandmother, and she was so different from grandmother, but alike in a lot of ways too. They were both very saving and frugal. And I remember you telling me that story one time about going out there to spend the night and eating ice cream. You remember?
Gran, she was so neat and everything she did. Her house was spotless all the time. It was just a very small house, but it was so neat. Everything she did, her clothes, and my Aunt Clara had never married, and she lived with her most of her years. When they went shopping, they bought just real small quantities of things, and I loved ice cream that she had. She always had pineapple sherbet. She had a little chair that's a lot like Jenny had in her kitchen, and I remember sitting on this little stool beside the counter, and I could look out the window and see Stock Creek Church, and all my dad's family were they were country folks, and Janice's were more in town, city folks, and she used to give me a lot of grief about the difference between young high students and South High students, but that's another story.
Still do.
When I wanted ice cream, she would go to the freezer and get out this little box, a little cardboard paper box of ice cream that couldn't be more than a pint. And they would actually eat on that for a week. And of course, now I can eat half a gallon at just one sitting. That's just the way it was. Mom and Dad, John and Mary Elizabeth, I'm the oldest son, of course. They discovered each other at one of those country picnics. He was in the Army, and this was during World War II, and he had been home on leave, and I think a cousin of his, Harold Rule, had invited him out to a picnic one, and that's where Mom and that's where he met her. And I'm not sure how she was there, she was who invited her there, but all of her family, of course, was in town in around Vestal, and that's where she was raised. But there was an immediate attraction when they met that blossomed with long letter writing during World War II. He was overseas, and he was on the in the D-Day invasion. They went on to get married after the war was over. And shortly after I came along, some of my first memories were in a little bitty house up on Candor Avenue over in Vestal. They had rented a house from my mom's Aunt May. It was just a small house, no indoor plumbing, except I had a potted chair. One time I had swallowed a peach seed, and my mother she was a very attentive mother, and so she was scared something bad was going to happen to me. But my dad, in a certain way, he told her that everything would come out okay. Sure enough, it did. But there was, I couldn't have been more than these first memories of that time, 2 or 3 years old. I remember there was a dirt driveway beside the house, and that's where I would play with a lot of little cars and trucks. And I remember my dad, when he first went to work back in Knoxville, he would bring home raw shrimp from the market house downtown. And on Saturday afternoon, he would come back from work, and the shrimp would be wrapped up in white paper with a string around it. I remember that. And then I would sit there and I would eat more than he did. A lot of times he would take a nap on the couch. And I don't remember this except afterward, everybody getting kind of upset, but they say I hit him in the head while he was asleep with a potato masher. Evidently, I wanted his attention. He had a lot of medals. I had lost quite a few of them, and they let me play with those. And then, of course, then years later, when we always, I didn't have much liberty.
Well, he was in the war, wasn't he?
Yes, yeah, oh yeah. He was on the D-Day invasion to France on Normandy, Utah Beach, and he was wounded. And while he was laying there on the beach, his commanding officer came and told him, "Soldier, it's okay. The medics are on their way, and you'll be fine." And he had crawled over into a crater where a mortar shell had exploded on the beach, and that's where he was taking cover. He's the only general that went in on the invasion. He had petitioned General Eisenhower to go in with his troops. He had been repeatedly denied, and finally he kept asking so many times. He had granted him permission to go in with his troops. So he did. He was the only general that actually landed in that invasion. All the others were at sea, coordinating everything. He later died himself shortly after that invasion, and just at the beginning of the war. He was a baseball player himself in a community team out in Stock Creek, and all the women would have these pie bake thing sales, and they would raise money to buy the team's uniforms, and it was really a big deal back then. They had actually wool baseball uniforms, and he was quite a player himself. And he's always been athletic. He would throw balls to me out in the front yard. I remember explicitly him doing this and letting me hit my balls with a bat, and he was pitching to me. But I would always pick up the bat and swing left-handed. And I remember him time and again coming, walking to me, turning me around, and he wanted me to bat right-handed. But before he got back to pitch another ball, I turned around and would bat left-handed. And to this day, I still do things left-handed like that. A lot of things, most things right-handed, but several things I still do that. And even then, they were always active in church, at Emmanuel Church. And the preacher there was Homer Cate. His son is now a retired chancellor in Knox County. I remember we didn't have a car then, but one of the great men in the church was named Hubert Oldham. And he was also in the surveying business. He had his own company. And he had a Jeep with a Army colored tin top on it. He would come up and pick us up and take us to church on when it snowed. Also, when we would go to work, I remember him walking down the hill. They called it up on the hill that was on the other side of the railroad tracks on Candora. But he would be walking over to the end of the line. The end of the line was there at Gilbert's grocery store across the street from the church. And he would catch the KTO bus, go to work. My dad's father died when Daddy was 3 years old, so he never really had any real memories that he could really put his finger on. And I, of course, had zero memories. I mean, I grew up, only had one grandfather. That was my mom's dad, of course, Horace Claiborne. We would go out on every Sunday, and it was just a routine thing that we'd go to our grandparents' house on Sunday after dinner. I think my generation, Janis's generation, we kind of dropped the ball on that. We've got our children have cousins that they don't even know exist, and I have a few regrets. I have several regrets over that. I think our generation has dropped the ball in keeping families together, unified. But they would, after dinner, and a lot of times we had dinner out on the grounds there underneath the trees, and we'd have these big tables, the white tablecloth paper on them for the tablecloths, and everybody would bring food and fried chicken and all that stuff. And then after dinner, well, they had this croquet court that they had made on the front yard. It was level as this floor is right here. Not a weed in it, a white picket fence around it. And everyone, all the men, played croquet. And there's only one woman that got to play, and that was my Aunt Roma. And she had moved to New Jersey, and so when she came home to visit, she always got to play. But absolutely no children, no little kids ever set foot on that croquet court except one, and that was Greg Fridge. And he was my first cousin. My mom and his dad and his mom, brother and sister. And so we were all scared to death of walking on that croquet court. So we had a lot of time on our hands. So my cousins, John and Greg, Walter, and me, we would engage in these fights with walnuts. Trees would drop all these walnuts in the fall, and so we would use those as ammunition to have these little wars. And they were all three of them were older than me, and I was scared to death that I was going to get hit with older guns.
How come Greg got to go on the croquet court and nobody else did?
Well, I guess Greg was probably more skilled than the rest of us, and he was just a natural athlete. He and his brother John both were great. They were really good divers and in water sports, and so he got to do a lot of things that the rest of us get to do. Then had moved to out in the county and went to an Anderson school. I think that's where I had my first bicycle wreck. I remember racing down Edwards Drive and on my first bike, and looking over my shoulder to see how far ahead I was, and hit a big hole and went over the handlebars. And that's when I think I was credited with having my first concussion. So there's been quite a few of those to follow in later years. And I remember eating watermelon out on the back stoop. It wasn't really a porch; they called it a stoop.
Yeah.
And hot summer, no air conditioning, but I remember eating right red, juicy watermelons out there. And
they don't taste as good to me now as they did back then for some reason.
And by the way, do you still have that a need for those watermelons? I mean, You still enjoy buying watermelons.
I buy watermelons and they'll taste
And
horrible, but I'm still searching for that good watermelon that we used to have.
I remember going to the fair one time. I think Mom was sick, and my dad took me to the Tennessee A&I fair, and I was always real small kid, and so they had a guy there that was you would guess your weight, and so he tried to guess my weight, and of course it wasn't even close. He was always real high, and so I got to pick out like a plaster product or something. It was a little squirrel. I was so proud of that thing, and carried it around, and I hadn't gone. It hadn't been 15 minutes after I got my squirrel that I was going up a little concrete walk there, and it had gravel all over it, and I slipped and fell and shattered my squirrel. And so
That set him back years and years.
So, yeah, that did something to me. I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was your first.
But
goes on with your concussion problem.
Those were also good times. That's when I got my first bike and my first pup tent, and I remember that smell of canvas, a new canvas tent in the summertime, and I would be out there, and it had to be in the 90s, but I wanted to be in my tent, in the middle of the day out there, and it was hard, but and there's something about the certain things that you smell at that age you never forget.
I think it's really neat how the bicycle, you still ride bicycles. The tents, camping's always been just such a huge part of our married life, our life before we got married life, all the way through to the kids and the grandchildren, everybody that's been, when we were first married, we couldn't afford to go a lot of places. So you could go to the Smokies and take a tent that you bought, Campbell Tent Company, I think.
Yeah, I bought a tent, cabin-shaped tent from Campbell Tent Company for $55 on the there.
Which was a lot of money back then.
That was I guess that was a lot of money.
It's before we were married, I know.
And, but we would, especially when we got married, we didn't have any money to do anything much. And so we took the kids camping in Cades Cove, and then there was no charge. You could camp free. And, but then they started assessing a charge, and it was $1 a night to camp. And so that was going to be $7 for the week. And we were just incensed that they would charge us that much money to camp.
Something. And we paid taxes. And we should get from free.
So we've always had great times camping ever since, and both our kids camp, and grandkids always enjoy some of those things that we did then. And you're exactly right. All the things that I was interested in then, camping and bikes and boats and water, those are my same interests now. Those things have never wavered.
When I was growing up, until I was about 13, I had a sister who was 3 years younger than me, Nancy, and a brother who was 6 years younger than me. And when Jim was born, I was about 6.5 or 7. Dad went out on the corner of Mark Mill Pike and Crenshaw Road, and he bought an acre and a half, I believe, of land that was just land. There was nothing on it, from Fred and Myrtle Sims, who were his cousins, that owned a lot of property around there, and built a log house. And it was the first log house of its kind around there. And so all you had to say was, oh, I grew up in the log house, and everybody knew immediately where that was. But it was so funny because you could go out to the back door of the log house and step outside on the back stoop or porch and look up the hill, just out the door and up the hill. And there was a log house at the top of the mountain. And that's where Dad's grandmother and his dad that's where he was raised. And it was Grandma Owen's house. And I thought it was really how you come full circle. My grandfather grew up there and with his brothers and sisters. And then Dad eventually came back and built a house there. But when I was 13, I think my parents got a divorce, which was unheard of back then. People just did not divorce. I don't know what they did, but they didn't divorce very often at all. So my life abruptly changed in a lot of different ways. My mom went to work. She worked at Hamilton Bank, and she went to work at night. So that left me at home with my sister, who was 10, and my brother, who was 7. And I was sort of like the surrogate mother. I was the fill in mom. And I had to, do everything, make sure their clothes were washed, make sure they got to bed, make sure they did their homework, control my brother, he was like a whirling dervish. You all know how he is, how he was when he was grown up, and you can only imagine when he was little. Jim was always doing something. My parents had this probably love-hate relationship where they didn't really criticize each other after they were divorced in front of us, but mother more so than daddy. But daddy had his ways of getting his licks in. One time he bought Jim a monkey, and it was this, I can't even remember. I keep thinking his name was Zach, but I'm not sure. Was it Zach? Okay. He bought Jim this monkey, and the monkey he was berserk. The monkey was crazy. And the monkey would jump all over everything. It would get on the top of mother's drapes and have accidents all down the drapes. His greatest delight was to pee on light bulbs that were on lamps, and they would shatter and the glass would go everywhere. And Jimmy just loved that monkey, and mother hated that monkey. And dad just sat around and smirked a lot. He did a lot of smirking during that time. And Nancy and I were just like, Zach the monkey. But he would ride around on Jimmy's shoulder, on top of Jimmy's head. And one day I came in the living room, and mother was sitting on the couch reading, and the monkey was sitting, and Zach was sitting on top of her head. And I was like, she hated that thing. I thought she would have stabbed it to death. And I said, Mom, Zach's on your head, thinking that she probably passed out or something. And she said, I know. She said, but he's being quiet. He's not using the bathroom. He thinks I'm just going to let him sit there for a while. And she did. So that was one of the things that Dad helped Jim do. And Jim tormented mother with the monkey. And then one time he decided he was going to go into high jumping. He was, I don't know why, Jimmy was not skinny by any means. He played football, and he was always struggling to get under the weight limit because all the little teams, the grasshoppers and the grass cutters, you all had a weight limit. You couldn't weigh more than a certain amount or you couldn't play. So he and Steve Knight, who was one of his best buddies out there where we lived, they were constantly trying to go on diets and stuff. But Jim decided he was going to join the track, whatever, and do high jumps because he thought those were just the coolest thing. So we had a couch in our living room, and it was right at Christmas time. And the couch had wooden arms. I always remember that, wooden arms. And Jim, ingenious little thing that he was, got a jump rope from one of Nancy or I, and tied one side onto the couch, the wooden arm on the couch, and one side onto the tree trunk. And then he got back at the end of the living room, and he was going to jump over those and hurdle. Well, needless to say, he was too big and gravity took over. He did not clear the road. The Christmas tree came crashing down, broke all the bulbs, all the ornaments that mother tried to keep nice, broke the arm of the couch, the wooden arm, split it right down the middle, and got up and said, I don't think I'll try out for hurdles. I think I'll do something else. And walked away, was no problem. And I was the fixer. I was picking up the tree, tried to do everything. And mother just about had a connection fit. And I thought, since, even though Jim was her favorite because he was the chosen boy, the only boy she had, I just knew that he was finally going to get his due. She was really going to come down hard on him. It was my fault because I let him do that, and I should have stopped him. So my life was constantly being a mother, sort of, but it had my favorite memories of growing up. It was so funny because even Mike's cousins and stuff, we moved out there. We weren't from there. We were more from the city, but we moved out what was considered the country then. And I rode the school bus with Greg and John Ed and, all the kids he was related to, cousins with. I went to Moreland Heights, first grade through eighth. At the top of the hill, right past our house, the bus was a bus stop. And if you lived on the far side of that bus stop, you went to Bonnie Cage. If you lived on this side of our house side of the hill, you went to Moreland Heights, and it was across Browns Mountain. And we went through the eighth grade then, and they didn't have kindergarten. But for a while, I was the first one to oldest once I was in school. I had a first grade teacher, Miss Curley, and a second grade teacher, Miss Gaston. This is when Jimmy really started tormenting me. Miss Gaston, I used to rub her back all the time. She was a single lady and just such a sweet little thing. And so was Miss Curley. I was just the apple of both of their eyes. I liked to read and I liked to do all the things, and I would never cause any trouble because I didn't want to get in trouble at home. So back then, you really respected your teachers and kept your mouth shut. So I was the perfect student for those first 2 years at least. Miss Gaston just thought I was wonderful. Well, when I was in probably the fourth or fifth grade, Nancy had already joined me in Moreland Heights, but she was good. She was a real smart kid, and she was a people pleaser too, and was always wanting to be a cheerleader and stuff like that. So she was always trying to make everybody happy. So she was no problem, and she didn't bother my persona that I already had in school. So that was good. And then here came Jimmy in the first grade. And I can remember one time being in the fifth grade, and one of the little first grade students came up to the door and spoke to the teacher, Miss Fesser, I think. And Miss Fesser said, Janis, Miss Curley needs you down in her class if you could go down there. Well, I knew it was bad because that's the class Jimmy was in. And so I went down there and was trying to act like I didn't know him and was not related to him, but I knew they had found me out already. And I walked in and she said, Janis, yes. And she said, you're going to have to do something with your brother. And I said, what's he doing? And she said, he's crawling up and down the aisles of the classroom, snorting like a pig and biting everybody on the leg. And that just crushed me because I had never, crawling up and down like an animal. I was so mad at him. I got him by the ear and I took him outside the classroom and I just threatened him with an inch of his life because he had ruined my good name. And so he didn't do much better. Finally, it caught up with him and they retained him 1 year. All it was really with Jimmy, Mother always said he was the smartest of the three. He had the highest IQ, but he never much applied himself. But when he was in like a third grade, maybe they retained him and then he sort of evened out and he did pretty good after that. Never caused a lot of trouble, a lot more trouble after that. Some, but not a whole lot. But it was a fun experience. I know we used to ride the same school bus. I still get tormented by Rusty Goddard and Sanford Goddard because we were never ready when the school bus came. I was always trying to gather everything up. Nancy was screeching at the top of her lungs that we had hidden her shoes or hidden her books, and we were causing her to miss the bus on purpose because we were out to ruin her life. And Jimmy probably didn't even know where he was going. He just wandered around in some loose state, wondering about where he was to make the way in for football or something, I'm sure. And so they would torment me to this day because we always were running for the bus. Their picture of me was tearing down Martinville Pike with my little skinny hair blowing out behind me, trying to make the bus, and Nancy screeching with every bit of her body. And when we missed the bus, woe be unto us if we woke Mother up to get us. She had just gotten home from work and gone straight to bed. And so you didn't wake her up under penalty of death. And so there's been many a time that I walked to school. Now, Nancy and Jimmy, for some reason, made the bus, but I didn't for some reason. So I would walk, and I was real lucky because there was Carol Michaels, Carol Michaels now, it was Carol Thomas then. She and Becky Thomas, her sister, used to drive to work. They were already graduated from high school. So they would stop and take me occasionally. Vic Lesby used to take me occasionally. Just different listeners that got to drive would take me, but I always rode the bus for the whole 12 years I was in school. And I only went to 2 schools, Moreland Heights and Young. Um, so it was an exciting experience, to say the least. And I graduated, and then the year after I graduated, Nancy started high school. When she was there, she had already been a cheerleader at Moreland Heights, and so she tried out for cheerleader. And then it was just, she was in hog heaven. She would get everything, class favorite, prettiest in one year. And she was homecoming queen her senior year, captain of the cheerleaders. And by the time she was a senior and captain of the cheerleaders, Mike and I were married and lived on Moody Avenue. And she used to bring all the cheerleaders over to our house after school. They could walk over. We were real close to Young, and they would walk over and practice in the backyard. And then their mothers would pick them up from school. So it was, even at that time, we were still sort of playing mother and father to Nancy and Jim. But it was fun. It was, when you look back at the time, I thought I was just so put upon by everything. But in reflecting on it, if I hadn't done the things I did when I was in high school, I wouldn't know how to cook. I wouldn't know how to go. My grandmother hated to go grocery shopping. And so she would always, invariably, from the time I was probably 14, write a check to the A&P, which is down where,
Across from Berry Funeral.
across from, no, it was, that was back when it was closer up to
Oh.
Young High School. It was back in there where Ace Hardware is now, and that
Yeah,
shop
that's
is in
right.
that little store.
Right.
She would park in the parking lot, sign it, write a check to A&P, but not fill in the amount, sign her name, give it to me, and tell me to go buy the groceries. And I would go buy everybody's our groceries for a week. And we didn't have money. I think Daddy paid child support on 3 kids. And I think it was $100 a month. I think it was 90. And he was so gracious, although he didn't make any money either, that he would round it up to $100 to give Mom 100, which he thought that was, But then he did stuff like buy monkeys, so that just sort of blew right back down the tubes again. I would go in and I would buy the groceries, always conscious of, I could only spend such an amount, couldn't go over that. So we spent a lot of our money, grocery money. We had fish sticks a lot. I can still remember fish sticks were 32 to a package, I guess. Mrs. Paul's, we only got the best. And it's hard to not buy good fish sticks, And but we had Mrs. Paul's fish sticks. I don't know what else we ate. Maybe that's all we ate. That's all I can remember, though. Because I remember one time when we were at UT, Mother brought Mike home and picked us up, and was bringing Mike home, dropping him off, and we stopped at the ever-loving A&P, and Janis ran in to get the night supper and came back out with her little bag and set it down between Mike and I in the seat. And I remember Mike looking over his bag and then looking at me and looking at Mother and looking back in that bag, and he said, "Do you all ever eat anything but fish sticks? Is that all you have every night?" And I was like, "Yeah." Well, I can't even look at a fish stick in a store now. I just hate fish sticks. And I just get really mad when I see the box. So it must have really made a big impression on me. But it wasn't a bad, it's where I learned to do all the things I learned to do. And I got married when I was 18. So I better know it because there was nobody to teach me then. Everything we've always done, we've always known, our families have always known each other. We've always traveled sort of in the same circles in a way. We have a lot of history, and we both started out going to the same church. And so we've really just always, he, of course, is much older than I am. He's 6 months older than I am. So he was already around before I was. But we met each other in the nursery, I guess, at church, didn't we?
That's really the beginning, I guess, was our time in church. And although the first time I ever saw her was at Alcoa swimming pool, and
That he remembers.
and I remember, and so we had to be, I don't know, 10 or 12 years old, but it was a church outing and at Alcoa pool, and I remember her walking along the the side of the pool, and she had a football jersey on over her swimsuit, and I thought, well, I didn't have any idea who you were, but that's the first time I remember seeing Janis. And, but then we were involved together in church and, at Adam. And after living in the county, we moved back into the city on McNabb Street. And I remember going to Flanagan Elementary School. And Mr. Blackwell, who was the band director at South High School, also did all the feeder schools, kind of recruiting members in elementary school for eventually being in the high school band. And so he had a little meeting and called down people down to the band room to see about joining the band. And so he asked me, I went, and he asked me what instrument I would like to play. And I said, I'd like to play a trumpet. I want to play a trumpet. And he said, oh, well, he said, trumpet players are a dime a dozen. I could remember this verbatim. Trumpet players are a dime a dozen. He said, I think you would do well with maybe a woodwind, a clarinet, or a saxophone. But I didn't realize it, but I had this really big overlap by then. Later, wore braces for a long time, but I think he suggested that because of the armature required to blow a clarinet or flag clarinet was a perfect fit for my overbite. It was a long time before I really realized what I think how that happened.
Mike always was like in church when we were in the junior intermediate departments, older in high school. He was really cute. He was probably one of the cutest guys in that age group.
There were very few guys there. Sorry.
I needed glasses when I was younger, but I thought he was really cute. But I didn't like him because my best friend was Peggy Cavassis. And Peggy had this horrific crush on Mike. I mean, she just thought the moon rose and set in him and just sort of blew her off. They were friends, but nothing. He wasn't about to ask her out. And she had all these dreams of him asking her to the prom and him doing this and doing that. And so even though he started sort of talking a little bit to me, I would have nothing to do with it because I was Peggy's friend and he was really, I didn't think nice to her. He could have taken her to the prom if he really wanted to. So the whole time, our senior year, and she was pining over him and he was talking to me some and I was ignoring him. And Peggy decided after we graduated, she was going to go to Tennessee Tech. So it came time, I guess, whenever she went to Tennessee Tech, I don't know, in the August or September, she packed up and her parents took her to Cookeville. And I'd say Peggy was probably about Farragut in the car going to Tennessee Tech. And I ran into Mike and he said, hey, you want to go to see a movie? And I said, sure, I'd love it. Because she was out of town. She was, and so I thought, it's my time. I'll see, he's been asking sort of, so I'll just go. And I must say I've changed my mind about
your life changed.
My life changed totally in that moment when I said, sure. I did not know what that one word was going to entail some 57 years later, 58 years later. But we dated for a while. Just thought he was the cutest thing I had ever seen, and we decided we were going to get married. But my parents would have none of that. Mom didn't want to lose her housekeeper cook in the first place, and Dad, I don't think he would have approved of anybody. I don't care who they were because he was just like that as far as boys were concerned. He must have been a really rich scallion when he was younger because I think he thought all boys were up to no good. So I don't think he would have, neither one of them would have voluntarily let us get married. So we decided we were going to get married and we were going to run off and get married because that's what everybody was doing back then. It was, at the beginning of Vietnam and draft board and you were having a draft number and
blah, 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 blah. Well, we didn't do that because
Oh, we didn't do that because of that, but that's
we
just
were
everybody was getting married. That was the deferment at that time. So
we were both at UT, and we had a student deferment.
yeah, we were both enrolled at UT. Mike occasionally went to classes. I think I saw the inside 2 or 3 classrooms, and that was about it. I was a great big zero as far as my UT commitments concerned. I think I was meant for other things other than academia. I don't think that was ever a strong suit with me.
We decided to go to Robbinsville, North Carolina to get married. And
But we had to have a plan.
I didn't have a car. Didn't even have a car.
No, we didn't.
I went over. I found an old 1950 Plymouth that was sitting at a gas station on Chapman Highway, and I went in and tried to make an offer, find out if this car was for sale, and they said, "Well, it could be." And so we started negotiating about buying this car to determine the price, and I kept having to go up every time in like $50 increments.
It's a great negotiation.
So finally, instead of going down, it kept going up. And so there was an older guy, and of course I was just a kid, and I was 19 years old. And so I ended up paying $275 for a 1950 Plymouth that was worth no more than $100. And so
Which has been the story of our lives.
And
it's an impressive.
Yeah, most of my car deals since then have been similar to that. So we planned our getaway, and was your mom at work or something?
My mom, of course, worked at night.
And so we planned to do a real early morning getaway, and while she was still at work. And so Janis, she didn't have too many dresses back then, and so she brought me her best dress and to iron. And so I said it. My mom and dad were on a church trip with a much younger group. They were gone for the weekend, and so I had her dress, and I set up the ironing board, and I ironed her soon-to-be wedding dress the night before we eloped. And
which I think I paid a whopping 50 cents for at Zayre's. That was, I think that was,
I remember
expensive. I spared no expense for that.
So off we went. We ended up going to Robbinsville, North Carolina, and we did get married. And then we were going across the mountain because we were going to spend the night in Gatlinburg. And so the day before, I had a summer job at Benco Plastics, and I stopped at Valley Bank on Chapman Highway, drew out $20, my last $20 that I had in the bank. And I think she had a little bit of money, but that was it. So we started our venture off with my last $20. We take off and we leave Robbinsville, heading to Gatlinburg, and got in this horrible rainstorm. And that car, I didn't know it, but that car had a vacuum type system for the windshield wipers. They weren't electric. And so every time I would push the gas pedal down, the windshield wipers would stop. And so we were trying to see out and having to slow down. And we finally got through the rainstorm, though. We got to Gatlinburg, and we found the Marshall's Creek Rest Motel, a drive-up motel that, by the way, is still there to this day. And we got this room. It was number 16, and I believe it was for $15. We spent the night there, and for supper, we decided, we need something to eat. It's getting late. And we started looking at our money situation, and there wasn't much money left because we'd already spent most of it on gas and the preacher in Robbinsville, a small amount, and this motel room. So we go downtown at Gatlinburg, and on the far end, before you get to the park, there was a Kentucky Fried Chicken thing. So we bought a 3-piece Kentucky Fried Chicken dinner, and that was our wedding night meat.
We shared it.
Of course, we had to split that too. And off we went back to the room, and there weren't. I think we ate the chicken in bed. There was no tables or anything. Very small room, and so that's how our first day of marriage went, and of course it's been a few ups and downs since then, and we have just a little bit more money now than we had then, uh,
But periodically over the years, we go back
oh yeah,
to Marshall's,
yeah,
to the
we've been
same room
same
number
room
16. We've done that several times
several
over the
times, and
years.
ironically, it's the same color scheme. It was a
Yeah.
kind of they had a lot of paneling, pine paneling, and trimmed in turquoise or something. And we found out there was two brothers and a sister that owned that motel from the very beginning. They'd been there for decades, the early tourist times of Gilmer. And we stayed there with them until this last time we were there. One of them had died, and they had sold it. And so it was a young fellow from California that saw an opportunity. So he bought this little motel, and it's still there today. And we occasionally go back there.
It's really funny because we got married in Robbinsville at a place called Melba's Cloth Shop. The pastor who married us, we picked a Saturday to go, and a lot of things aren't open in Robbinsville at that particular period of time on Saturday. But this little guy that married us fixed watches in the corner of Melba's Cloth Shop. And he was also a licensed minister. So he said, yeah, he'd marry us. We had our license and everything. So he walked up and down the aisles, and there was this little grandmother and her granddaughter picking out material for something. So he got them to be witnesses. And we stood there in the middle of bolts of cloth and all these clock pieces and got married. And I always wondered later, I thought to myself, I wonder if he's really licensed. I wonder if I'm legally married. And I figured after a while, the law of averages got me in. I think after 7 years, it's common law anyway. I don't know if it's recognized in Tennessee or not. But anyway, I used that. But it was really cool. We lived in a trailer when we first got married. And I worked at the phone company, and I was newly hired. So I was a long distance operator. And I had to work split shifts because I was one of the newest ones. That was like you'd work, say, 11 to 4, and then you'd have a 3-hour break and then work 7 to 11 or something. You'd have a split. And I didn't have a car. I didn't drive. I didn't have my license. Mike had the car that we did, our little plant. He was at work, and so he didn't get off that early. So I would spend many a day on that split shift, just either sitting in the lounge for 3 hours or walking downtown, because the telephone company was the end of Gay Street, the far end of Gay Street. And I hated that job with passion. I despised that job. They would count your ticket areas. You had to get every one correct and fill in little blanks and stuff. I just hated it. And usually I like meticulous things, but for some reason I didn't like that one. And then I was pregnant. And so I had morning sickness, afternoon, night, all 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the whole 9 months. So I was just one miserable little kid. Every once in a while, Mike would be off when I would have a split, and he would come pick me up. And my biggest thing I wanted to do was go to the Knoxville Zoo. I don't know whether it was a problem with being pregnant or what it was. Some people crave orange juice. I craved the zoo. And I wanted to go to the monkey house and look at the monkeys.
Which was Zach.
I guess that was a throwback from Zach. That I worked there. Once I took maternity leave and had Chrissy, I never went back. I told everybody, oh yeah, I'm just going to take a leave. I had no intention of going back. I would have scrubbed floors, toilets, anything, rather than go back to that place. So I had to. But then about that time, Mike got owned the phone company. We moved on up to 306 Moody, which was a tiny 2-bedroom house. And Chrissy was there. She was the first grandchild on either side of the family. So she was just the apple of everybody's eye. She was a fantastic baby. To be, bless her heart, to live with us who were 19 years old at the time then, and Mike was 20, and we knew nothing. I babysat, but we knew nothing about babies. And what we were supposed to do, and had a car that ran half the time. And poor little Christy was sick all the time. She had a horrible tonsillitis, really 104, 105 temperatures. And I spent more time on buses and Mike's mother taking me back and forth to the pediatrician to finally, when she was 3, they took her tonsils out, 2.5. And that's really young back then for them to take tonsils out, but they said she was just too sick. So she was there. We raised her halfway.
About that first rental house we lived in on Moody Avenue, it was very inexpensive, $55 a month fee and all this stuff. But that's where we first had our first garden. And there was basically a jungle behind the house. And we had no tools, we had nothing, no rotary tiller or anything. But our landlord lived next door to us. He had one of those rotary tillers. But there was a jungle back there. And I spent the first winter we were there on every Saturday cleaning all that off and burning, and we had fires every weekend and all that. And there was what was underneath it was the reddest, most dark red soil that you've ever seen. And so I called Janis' grandmother, Gordon.
My grandfather.
What did I say, grandmother? Grandfather. And because he always had gardens all his life, ever since Lake City, Cold Creek days and all that. And how to plant beans, how to plant corn and all that stuff. So he told me over the phone the spacing and all this stuff. And so we planted this garden, and I borrowed the rotary tiller from a next door neighbor, the landlord. And we had this humongous garden that most of the backyard. And it was on the slope like this. Great soil. It just fall through your fingers when you picked it up. And dark red, rich. People would come. We had no freezer. We didn't know how to can at that time. So we gave away white half runner beans by the Kroger bag full to anybody that came by.
Christy had a plastic swimming pool that you didn't blow up. It was one of those molded ones. And we had that totally full of green beans, white half runner beans. And you could just come get a paper bag and fill up your bag full of beans. And we had tomatoes, and we had, tell them why it was so.
Well, I was getting around to that.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
This was the most fertile soil that we've ever seen. And you could imagine, I didn't put any fertilizer on it because that was too expensive. What we found out is we were not on a sewer system on Moody Avenue. We had a septic tank, and we had put this garden in on top of the drain field. And we had this underground water system year round.
I don't know how many people we killed over the course of that summer, but they had well before they died. I'll say that.
But probably the main reason this garden flourished was around the clock water system. But we've never had a garden that good since, ever. And we've had a lot of gardens at different places.
We've never been on a drain field. Mike worked at the phone company. We had Laura. Then we moved further on down. We moved on down that Jefferson song, moving on up. We moved on down to 927 Moody and stayed there for a while. Mike's sporting recreation was softball. He took enough after his daddy that he wanted to play, or he played softball for the church softball team. And I'll let him tell you some of his. I used to go watch him. We would push the stroller down, walk down, because he played at Rock City Ballpark, which was 5 or 6 blocks from our house. And so lots of times I would push the stroller and take the girls, and we'd go watch Daddy play ball. So proud. Of course, Christy was. Laura was too young. And every once in a while, they would play at Evans Collins Field, that was the big thing where they'd have the tournaments and stuff. And that's where Mike's really came into his own as a softball player. His fame, it just preceded him. Tell the story about you playing. He was really fast, and so he was an outfielder. Now, you go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
You remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do now.
Channel blown out of your.
Probably not remember some of those things. I was actually still back there. Night school UT at this time. And I couldn't wait. I had this class in the a business building over there. I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, I couldn't wait till that class was over with so I could get to the ball field out in Evans Collins Field and near where the old Smoky Stadium used to be. So I take off out there, and I'm in right field, and the game was it was real close. And there's a football stadium there, also with a track around the football stadium, and that whole complex is evolved into something else now, a huge sports complex. And but there was a long ball hit to right field, and I had misjudged it. It went over my head, and so I ran back toward the stadium wall to retrieve this ball. I got it and wheeled around to throw to the infield, and I hadn't noticed, but there was a utility pole there with all these huge stadium lights on it, and then I was in perfect alignment with that pole with my back to it. But when I wheeled around to throw the ball, I hit that pole dead center, and the ball went backwards and toward the football stadium. And I could hear, I felt my face is turning blood red, and I could hear people laughing on the sidelines. And I think Janis was one of the loudest ones laughing. And I was just, I just hated the run back into the dugout. That's one of the most embarrassing things that I've seen in my short-lived sports career.
You couldn't have heard me laughing because I was struggling with it. Olivia was, Laura was sitting in trying to hide and act like, once again, like, Jimmy, I didn't know you. I just wandered in and was watching.
Yeah, that was...
But bless his heart, he tried so hard. And I've always been a real sports person. I love baseball. I love football. And really, when Mike and I were first married, I knew more about the rules of the game than probably he did, because I grew up with my daddy and my Uncle Joe, and they watched football, and my grandma, Dad's mother, used to love football and baseball. So I grew up knowing the rules and stuff. And I was just like, what happened to me? I'm a sports connoisseur. I like baseball players. And
yeah.
But he, bless his heart, he was fast. He was a fast runner.
Fast.
He could beat out butts to first base. And so that was good.
But I was we played a lot of sandlot football after church and with some older guys too. And that was my first year working for Southern Bell. And I ended up breaking a wrist twice playing sandlot football. Although I never played the organized sports, but somehow it was always in these pickup games. Something would happen to me. The telephone company had this policy: you had to work there for a year before you got any kind of health benefits. And so they weren't going to let me work. I was not going to be able to do my job. And so I was in a coin collecting crew where I went around all over East Tennessee and Kentucky and picked up money out of coin telephone booths. And I don't think there's maybe but one of those things left in the state of Tennessee now. But at any rate, so I went to Mr. Arthur Garrett, who was the commercial manager for this region, and just virtually begged him to let me drive, because I convinced him that I could do this driving with one arm, and he did. And so he took a lot of responsibility on himself then when he did that, but everything went good. And that's that era was when we had just moved back on Moody Avenue, and we had I think we had a trailer when we first got married, and the rent on it was $85 a month. We did that for no more than 2 months and felt this was just outrageous. We couldn't afford this. So we found this little house on Moody for $55 a month. And by the way, I got that mixed up with the price of that tent that we used to camp in. It wasn't 55 million, but this rent was. And so we stayed there for a couple of years, I guess. And then we bought our first house that H.L. Huffmaster owned further on down Moody. So that was our first home.
And I think our
And
first sales payment was like 92 or something, wasn't it?
it wasn't much. Our first house was $9,500, and I misunderstood what he said, and so I gave him $9,000. And so it wasn't until a long time later that he said, I actually wanted 9,500 for that house, but he let it slide.
Mike has selective hearing. He's always.
I think I just heard the 9,000, but so those were unusual times. That my salary was $78 a week. Made $78 a week, and I don't know what the house payment was. I don't remember, but it was probably less than that. And but it seemed then, you always hear stories about the good old days and all that, and we used to tire of hearing older people talk about the good old days, and now we're doing the same thing. But it's hard to imagine that we would have a $20 grocery bill, and get a week's groceries for $20 at the new Kroger store.
And that included Similac and baby food.
Yeah.
That came out of the grocery bill. So, we were.
It was just unbelievable. And I think, we had one of our first Christmases there at that time when Emily, Christy was firstborn. And I remember we had no money to buy Christmas presents. That was a big deal. We had to buy Christmas presents for everybody we thought. And so we got a credit card that had Sears on Central Avenue with $100 cap on it. Couldn't fit. That's all the credit they would give us. I had no credit rating or anything. So we bought all of our presents with on $100 for everybody in the family,
including Chrissy.
Yeah. So those times are kind of nostalgic, kind of fun times to think about now, how we did things then, or were able to do things, and how things have changed now. And I don't know really if actual buying power is any better now than it was then. So
just more expensive, but still the same ratio.
We still seem to have grocery bills that somehow we can afford, but it was a different time.
Yeah, it's almost like you've gone on in time, but you still have the same problems that you had back then, or people do. It's just more money or more complicated, but it's still the same issues. And I think that's just something with time itself. I think history just repeats itself over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But it's when you look back at it, what we thought was the end of the world was nothing. What you take when you're so young, you think everything is such a big deal. And when you get older, you realize that there's not that many big deals around. Everything's going to work out. But the poor kids, we had Laura, like I say, when we were at 927 Moody. And I can remember, them growing up and putting things together on Christmas Eve late at night. We never did anything, of course, ahead of time. That would be preposterous. Why would we do that? Why not save everything until the last minute? So, 2:30, 3:00, we'd be putting a sink and stove together and not be missing a screw. And Mike would have to drive over to the phone company and look on his truck to see if he had an odd screw in a bin somewhere to bring it back. So, and Easter egg hunts. And Laura was our adventurous in some ways. She was very outspoken. She was a little spoiled. She loved tape. I always told Mike if we could buy stock in 3M Company, we would be millionaires, because she would take a roll of masking tape and her tricycle and a skateboard, and she'd make this intricate trailer. And she would put things on the skateboard and haul it up and down the sidewalk in front of the house.
On a tricycle.
Yeah, behind a tricycle. And Christy was just the opposite. Christy was extremely placid. She was very good. She did what she was supposed to do. Laura, you never knew what she was going to do. When she was 2 and 3, we took her to the beach. We took her to Walt Disney World. She got lost. We've never lost a kid in our lives except Laura that time. And we found her in some store eating an ice cream cone, not the least bit concerned whether she ever saw the two of us again. She was happy in her own skin doing that.
Sitting on the counter.
Sitting on the counter. And then we looked up one time at the motel at the beach, and she was up on the 4th floor looking at us through the little
He was glance elevator.
yeah, waving at us as Christy and Mike and I were down at the pool. She always took her clothes off when we took her to the beach. From the time she was walking and could get her pants off, she took them stark naked, run up and down the beach, hated to wear clothes. And Christy was just appalled by all of this. One of them, and I can't remember which one it was, we took them to Daytona because we thought that was really, we were in the money then. There was no camping that year. We were going to Daytona, going to where the cars drove on the beach. We were so excited. And we spent the first part of the trip trying to keep the kids from getting run over by cars. And one of them went promptly in the sand and started digging up a dead bird, a dead pelican. You remember? I don't remember which one it was. And so we changed beaches immediately and went to something a little bit more family oriented than Daytona. But we camped a lot. And the first thing we always did, there was 2 things that we were like solid rules in our house. When it was time to put up the Christmas tree, the girls had something to do away when the lights were going on. They could not be in the same room with their father because unmentionable things were coming out of his mouth. And knowing Laura, she would have repeated because lights were just, and I think that's an age-old problem with every family, lights on a Christmas tree. Now you buy trees with the lights already on them and don't have that problem. Also, the other thing was we would go camping all the time. And when we got camping, the first thing that came out of the packing were the tricycles and bicycles. And the girls got on them and off they went because they did not stay at the same campsite while their father was putting up the tent for $55 and
50. Yeah.
whatever.
No.
And digging, not trenching it like you would do to keep the rain out. We did moats and around our tent. We had to have a drawbridge to get in those bad boys. But he had the best moat you've ever seen. But he was not in a good mood. That was not. Now, after he got the tent up and after he got the moat dug, he was through. Then I had to carry the water, get the firewood, do the cooking on the stove. He did fill up the stove because I did not fill up the gas. And we were so poor. That was what I was thinking of this one. He was talking about the how much they were charging for camping fee. You could buy a thing of Coleman fuel for what? $1, $2 a gallon. And that's what your lanterns and your stoves were supposed to run on. But you could also go to the Exxon or some station, Amoco station.
American.
Yeah. The Amoco station and buy
White gas.
Unleaded gas for 15 cents a gallon. And guess what we chose? And then we would spend a half of our camping trip going around to all the other campsites who'd already left, getting their wood they had left over. I mean, we spared no expense on these camping trips. We were all in. We had bears. The girls grew up with bears walking around the campsite. One time we started out young. Laura went on her first camping trip when she was 6 weeks old, and she slept in a car bed inside the tent, and I had her in there one night, and we were camping with, Dickie and Louise Davis were our best friends, and we did everything with them. We went to the beach, we went to camping at the mountain, we did everything with them. She was a beautician. She used to cut my hair. I mean, we were talking about that this morning. When I was younger, I got my ears pierced, and back then you used self-piercing earrings, and my earring came out. And so she said, "Oh, don't worry. I don't know how to do this. I'll put it back in for you." Stupid me. Okay. Thank you. So it's like a needle. When you stick them in, they make a new hole. Well, I had 2 exit holes out of this ear because she didn't hit the right hole, and she started right, but ended wrong. So that was a very painful experience. But anyway, I digress. We did everything with them. But one time we got her in there and a bear walked between us and the tent. And I think that really brought it home to me because all these crazy tourists from all over the country would get pan lids and climb them together and chase the bears around the campsite. They thought that was just really good fun around the campground. And we were saying, you don't do that, but that's what we did. And we learned. The girls grew up. Laura had a special ranger friend called Mr. Ranger Bill that he even wrote to her for a couple of times. He was a teacher somewhere in the United States.
He was he lived in Cincinnati.
Cincinnati. And he was a summer ranger. He would come and work and then go back to teach school. But I thought that was really cool. And she would go on little nature walks and stuff. And they just grew up having such an appreciation of nature. And Cades Cove, I think you could ask either Christy or Laura or even the three granddaughters, and they could say, where's your favorite place to go? And they would say Cades Cove because it's made such memories for them. They were, I think, good kids. They really, Chrissy's only trouble she ever got in that I knew about. Let me rephrase that right then. When she was in high school, she used to hang around with older girls that played, might coach softball, and we knew a lot of these girls. And she would always hang around with girls a couple of years older than her. Now, we thought, wow, we are so lucky. We don't have to worry about any of this stuff going on because she's hanging with these mature older girls. I'm not even sure what those girls did. I don't want to know. But something tells me that it wasn't all making cookies and visiting the sick and elderly. I think they had a few little times on their own. But she and Sharon Alley, who was a friend of hers that played volleyball with Christy, decided they had poured a new sidewalk at South Doyle, or Doyle, I guess then. That's what they called it. And they decided they would sign the concrete with a couple of the football players that were out there. And so the football players did their names, and Sharon and Christy wrote their names. And lo and behold, they got called to the office the next day and got in trouble for writing their names, defacing school property, I think is the way the principal referred to it. And so I came home from work that day and Christy was just crying and crying and crying. And she said, I'm in such trouble. I'm going to get kicked out of school. I'm not going to graduate. I'm so sorry. And I thought, oh my Lord, my child's on drugs. And drugs were non-existent really back then. And I just knew something horrible had happened. And when I said, what did you do? And I finally got her to say, I wrote my name with a stick in wet cement. And I got tickled because I worked at Vessel School, which we got our kids from Montgomery Village. And I was used to separating boys from fights and taking knives off of them, really heavy duty things. And here's my kid saying she's in bad trouble because she wrote her name on the sidewalk. I thought it was sort of amusing, although that is defacing property. I still was so relieved that it wasn't drugs or drunken first period or something that I thought, the poor thing had to go to shop. She and Sharon had to sweep out the shop for, I guess, a week. It was just horrible. Something terrible. The punishment did not fit the crime, but she never signed anything else. So Laura, on the other hand, we had a ball car wash for one of Mike's softball teams to do something. And Laura was younger, and Laura was a little used to getting her way. And she got one of the magic markers we were using. We had used the Bank of Knoxville on Chapman Highway because that's where John worked, Mike's dad. And of course, he let us have the bank, got permission. Unbeknownst to us, Laura walked around to the drive-in and signed the stone, wrote her name on the stone in magic marker. So Mike was down there for
red magic marker.
Red magic marker. Yes, I forget the color. That does make all the difference. It shows up so well. With steel wool, trying to get that off of that stone. Backsteady was so angry.
Yeah, he called me from the office the next day and said he had a little problem. And what happened, so he told me that she had written her name all over the back of the bank building down there. And so So we had to go down there and grind it all or sand it off or something, But yeah, but they both have been easy kids to raise. I mean, they've never given us a minute's trouble, and we've been fortunate and blessed in that.
I want you to
Yeah.
retell, or I want you to talk about teaching the girls to drive and letting Laura drive
Um,
you around, how she would do things and teach her. And then Christy, I really taught Chrissy more or less
Oh.
more than you did.
well, of course, Laura is 4 years younger than Christy, and that Christy was at the age where she spent a lot of time in her bedroom listening to music and stuff, and so Laura was kind of she wasn't that old yet, and so she would be with me out driving, and so I would let her drive the car around, and I taught her how to drive a manual shift on in the parking lot at Alcoa Swimming Pool because there was a nice slope there, and it taught her to use the clutch, um, and she loved it. She did a lot of things very early, and Christy. I made a mistake. I was letting her drive too before this, and made a mistake of um, something about a tree or something. Or was that about the?
Well, she was driving somewhere and you were critiquing her. She already had her license.
And
I think she was like 18 then.
she was getting too close to the edge of the road or something, and so I was telling her how she should be doing this, and she was so
Angry?
well,
Angry.
she wasn't very happy with me, and we parked the car, and she said she would never ride with me again, ever. And
We were talking about this last Saturday. I had taken Shelby and Chrissy and dropped them off at the UT game so they wouldn't have a parking hole. And we were laughing about how Chrissy drove somewhere and he was critiquing, as he calls it, and fussing about different things she was doing. And I remember Chrissy getting out of that car and slamming the door as hard as she could. And she said, I will never drive with you in the car again. And she said, and I'm so proud I haven't until just recently. Now I don't care, but I didn't the whole time. My dad was really cool. He taught me to drive, but I never got my license, but he taught me to drive, and he never fussed at me. He never, but he would roll down the window and he would pick leaves from the side of the road as we were going past bushes. And that's how I had a clue that I was maybe a little too close to the side of the road. But he never said anything, which I thought was really good. Probably got in trouble with a lot of people that denuded their bushes, but it was okay. They were good. They were good kids. Chrissy had really good grades. Laura's grades were good. But Laura was the probably the more social of the two girls. Laura liked to have a lot of friends, and she liked to go places, and she was constantly keeping the roads warm. One more thing about Chrissy's driving, I let her drive with me a lot. And Chrissy had this unusual habit of when she was driving, when she was going around a curve, when she was going on a straightaway, she would be so slow. She would be going 10, 15 miles an hour, like some lady that was 104. And then we get to a curve, and the second we approached it, she would push the gas down, and we go around the curve on two wheels. And she just said she couldn't seem to understand that was not quite how it was done. But we used to drive with another one of her friends in the car, Elisa Harmon. He used to just be in the back seat, laying down laughing. She was giggling so hard at poor old Christy trying to drive. Chrissy's sort of like me. We drive because it's a matter of getting us somewhere. Laura loved cars. She loved speed. She loved changing gears. All the things that, she loved that. And Chrissy and I, we just use it as a means to get somewhere, and that's cool. Put some gas in it, going about our business. Chrissy went to UT at first. She started out at UT. And she was working at Goodies. Chrissy always worked from the time she was 16. Did she dropped out for a little bit. She came home. She was working at Goodies, and she said, Mom and Dad, I'm I've got this wonderful opportunity. They have decided to let me work, train me to be an assistant manager. And they're going to pay me X number of dollars, which was a lot more than what she was making as an hourly employee. And I get to do all kinds of fun things like go to court and do stuff like that. And so I'm going to drop out and take some time from school. Now, normally when you would go and throw a fit. And so we decided, I'm not going to really cool pants. So we decided we were going to be really cool about this and say, okay, if that's what you want to do, is your life, knock yourself out. Let them train you to be an assistant manager. Well, that lasted what, 2.5, 3 months, about 3/4 of the way through the next semester at UT. And she came in one day and she said, she said, if it's okay with you all, I think I'll go back to school. And I said, well, why? And she said, well, she said, they're paying me more money, but I'm working 3 times the hours I was working. So I'm making less money per hour. I have to go to court. I have to chase shoplifters out of the store trying to get the merchandise back. And she said, it's just not what I thought it was going to be. I think I'll just go out and get a degree. And so we were patting ourselves on the back, thinking how very smart and good we were. Chrissy had a habit of changing colleges. She couldn't really decide. First, she was in accounting, and then she thought that was adding and subtracting. And when she found that it was theories and applying stuff, she didn't like that anymore. And so I always tell people that she was in every college UT offered except animal husbandry. That's the only one I don't think she got into for at least a week or two. But I guess when she went back, she went to East Tennessee State. And that she pledged a sorority. She met 2 friends that are still friends with her till this day. They all lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, illegally. Chrissy wasn't supposed to be there, but they snuck her in. And she pledged the same sorority they were in. And my daughter, who had always made A's and B's, came home at Christmas and she wasn't smiling. She wasn't happy. Well, her grades were horrible. C's and D's, and I don't think she failed anything, but there was quite a few D's sprinkled in there. And so I just said, this is it. You get one more semester. You either raise your grades or you can stay up there and be a sorority girl for the rest of your life, but your daddy not paying for it. That's it. One semester is all you get. Well, the next semester, she dropped out of the sorority. She started studying, and at the end of that semester, she had all A's and B's. And decided that she would come back home. She was dating Walt at the time. They started dating when they were 16. They had stopped dating when she was in college, and she came back to UT, and they started dating some on and off again. And she went to work for Knox County Trustee's office. Bob Broom was a friend of John, Mike's dad's, and he got her a job up there. And he looked upon Christy through the years as sort of like another daughter. She was real close to the family, and he just loved her. And then when he retired, she worked for Tommy Shumpert, and he also adopted her sort of as another daughter. So those are 2 people. Both of those guys came to her wedding, and they said Bob Broom cried like a baby all during the wedding. He just broke his heart that his Christy was getting married. But that's a relationship that she had until Bob passed away, and she still has with Mr. Shumpert. She has lunch or breakfast with he and his wife and his daughter frequently. He keeps tabs on him. So she's just been amazing as far as her work ethic. She has worked, like I said, from the time she was 16. She was always doing something, even when she was going to school. Laura, on the other hand, got a job when she was in high school at food and developed this horrible allergy to polyester, she said. And every time she put her polyester uniform on, she started itching all over. She would go to work, clock in, and about 5 minutes later, she'd say, if we're not busy and you need somebody to clock out, I'll be glad to do that. So that lasted, 2 weeks? Did she ever get a paycheck? Paycheck
Not
there?
very long. Don't remember.
And that was just about, with the exception of her working maybe in the trustee's office one summer between when she was out of school. That's how she worked. That was hung her up. But she went to East Tennessee State from the beginning. And she decided as soon as she got there, she wanted to be a teacher, and she never changed her mind. She didn't deviate 1 second. The one who was always running around having fun, party person, was all of a sudden the best student. She loved the college she was in. She made good grades, and she got through in 4 years. East Tennessee State didn't offer a master's program at the time to give the 5 years and take their master's degree. So she graduated, real good grades in 4 years, and moved back home. And then it was time to find a job. But Laura was always fearful of talking to people that she didn't know. Remember when she would try to get her to go buy something?
Oh yeah, we would be at the grocery store, and I would give her some money. I say, "We pay the cashier, and if you will." And so she would immediately just start shaking her head no, and she would stand behind me and duck her head and hide behind me because she was so shy. She would not do that. Later, I think when she was working for you for a summer, she made this big presentation in front of a huge crowd at a hotel convention center. And it was just totally different. She's the same way in the classroom. She's has total command. Obviously, loves what she does and loves these kids. I will say one thing about her work here in college. She would come home. She came home every weekend, drive back and forth, but she was home every weekend. And so after a few weeks on her freshman year, I said, Laura, what do you think about maybe getting some part-time work, maybe in the administration buildings, some capacity there, chancellor's office or something? And she said, oh, just to pick up a little extra money, some spending money. And it might be a good experience. And she said, okay, I'll do it, Dad. I'll check on that Monday. So a couple of weeks went by. I said, well, how's that going, Laura? Have you found, were you able to talk to anybody about it, well, I didn't have a chance. I've been really busy. It's been a really busy week, but I'll check on it Monday. And so this happened. This became a bit of a pattern. And she went 4 years and never quite found the time
To go check on the job.
But I didn't really care. I was so proud of her for her stick-to-itiveness and her determination to stay in school, and she made great grades. I didn't really care. But I found it kind of funny and kind of amusing in a way. After a long period of time, I just wanted to hear her say it, I guess. But both the girls, Chrissy is just a phenom. She's been successful in every job she's had in colleges. She was at King University for 12 years, and she was Larson J's right-hand man and a lot of this downtown development. And now I think she's found the love of her life in this second harvest work. She has a passion for the purpose for people, and it's not just a job to her. She's very good at what she does. She recently spoke for me at one of my best friend's funeral that I had every intention of giving a eulogy, and it was a difficult time for me, and she stepped in. I wrote it, she presented it, and she was awesome. They both have many gifts, and they're real similar in so many ways and so different in so many ways. And so we've been nothing but blessed with those girls.
I think Laura, the thing that tickles me about her, I was working for East Tennessee Human Resource Agency during this time when she was in college and graduating, and I knew a lot of people in the surrounding counties and a lot of the people who were in maybe on school boards or something in the community that could have helped her get a job. I knew and could have helped her in that way, but that was Knox County. We didn't do anything in Knox County, and I didn't know much of anybody there. But she had heard by way of the grapevine that to get a job in Knox County, you had to be interviewed by this committee type thing, this person, and it was very difficult to do. And she just, back to the old Laura of old, she wasn't about to do that. So she decided she would. And I said, well, why don't you go to Union County thinking, we'll get her an interview there. And because I knew the guy on the school board and stuff, and he was saying they needed teachers, electrical. And I thought that she'd interview and then that'd break the ice and she'd be willing to come back to Knox County because they certainly paid a lot more and better conditions. So Laura said, okay, I'll go. So we called it there. She talked to the principal at Luttrell and he said, well, come on up this afternoon. Well, Luttrell, I don't know whether you know the town, but Luttrell's the good old boys. They chew tobacco in their offices and spit in their mellow yellow cans. And, it's just happy go lucky. So Laura had her little plaid red skirt and white Peter Pan blouse with this little thing. She just looked like $1,000,000. She's pretty. Both the girls are so pretty. And so she goes pressing in that school and scared to death, absolutely scared to death. And she walks in and she says, the principal, Mr. Arnwine, had his feet up on the desk, chewing tobacco with his mellow yellow can to spit in, with his stomach hanging over his pants, and said, well, is this really looking her up and down and stuff? And he said, what have we here? What can I do for you? And she said, well, I've come to interview you. My name's Laura Rule. I want to interview for one of your positions. Well, she came out about 20 minutes later, I guess. And I thought, oh, that didn't last too long. I wonder what happened. And she grinned. I said, how'd it go? And she grinned. She got in the car. I got to work next Monday. That guy and whoever was with him in the office, there was 2 or 3 of them there. They were so blown away by how this cute little girl that just graduated came pressing in that office that I think he would have let her be the assistant principal if she'd only asked for that job. So she worked at Luttrell for 5 years, teaching second grade and then kindergarten, and had stories, hilarious stories. And then had in the meantime, she got married and had Emily. And so she took a year or 2 off or so. She was pregnant with Olivia. So she took some time off and then went back to school. And this time we convinced her to try Knox County, just give it a try. So she got a job, of course, and she got a job at Bonnie Kate, which was like a half a mile from her house. And she's been there ever since. She has taught kindergarten 1 year, and then the rest of the time she's been in first grade. And she got teacher of the year 1 year. But I would go over some and help her because I have always been a frustrated teacher myself. That's what I should have done with my life if I did anything different. And to watch her was totally to be amazed by her. She would take all these little kids and like little rugrats that are just everywhere, and they idolized her. If she just gave them a look that looked like they were not doing what she wanted, they would just cry. They would immediately do it. We've had kids that are now grown, getting ready to get married, that were in her class in the first grade that cried themselves to sleep after they were passed to the second grade because she wasn't their teacher anymore. She would do all kinds of really neat things like teddy bear sleepovers and let them bring their teddy bears and wreck the room the next morning and make them think the teddy bears did it. And those kids believed everything she said. Doug's last name was Snap, and so she became Laura Snap, and she named her classroom Snapville. And they had everything, rooms, and she's what I think every child should have in kindergarten in the first and second grade. And that is a teacher who is loving and kind. It's sort of like a second mother, but is also strong enough and strong-willed enough to get them to want to mind her, not make them mind her, but want to because they want to please her. And so I think so many kids that are now graduating from high school and going to college and graduating have really been impacted by having her as a teacher. And I know if I had children today and she was teaching, I would want my children to go to her. That's how good And I've been in the school system for a long, long time off and on, substituting and I've being a secretary. And I am a pretty good judge of who's a good teacher and who's not. You learn real quickly who does busy work and who really cares. And Laura is one of the most caring teachers I think I've ever met, even though she is my daughter. I'm so proud of both of these girls. They have just done so much. And it just never ceases to amaze me that Mike and I could have raised two incredibly wonderful, intelligent, sweet girls. And they, in turn, have turned around with their children and done the same thing. And it's funny. We're talking about patterns and intersecting lives, and it's sort of like watching history repeat itself in so many ways. And you look back and you think, I don't have anything in me to give these kids. I don't know how this has happened, but through God's grace, He's helped raise them. But they, Laura and Doug, have two girls, Emily and Olivia. Emily's the oldest, Olivia's the youngest. Emily, when she was born, she was the first one. And I got this really smart idea because I wanted to keep her. So Mike and I got a card, a congratulations card, and put $50 in it because that was 25 years ago, and gave it to Doug and Laura and said, "We'll keep Emily Friday night, and you all go out and get a steak dinner at Yale Steakhouse." And Laura, kids that can't talk make Laura a little nervous because she doesn't ever know what they want. So she was more than happy to let us keep Emily that night. And Emily, in turn, spent every Friday night with us for 4 years and 3 months until Olivia was born. With every Friday night was her night. We did everything with that child. We could, if she would, Laura was getting her picture made, she'd call me and I'd have to come over and jump up and down like an ape to make Emily laugh when she was 2 months old. I mean, just time after time, something. But when Olivia came along, it's sort of like Emily thought, well, wait a minute. Here's this kid that cries all the time. And my mother pays more attention to her than she's paying to me right now. I better go back home and protect my turf. And Libby had colic, Lord love her heart, for the first 3 months. So she cried almost constantly. Emily looked at me one day and she said, "Can we just call God and give this one back and get one that doesn't cry?" She said, "I'm sick of this crying." But Libby literally cried all the time. But for some strange reason, we could make her laugh. And she got really fond. We used to have the same middle name, Marie. So Olivia got in her mind that she and I were twins. We were just different ages, but we were still twins. And so we've always had this sort of special twin bond going on. And we used to have to get in the car almost every night and drive from our house on Knight Road over to Water Tower Road, where they live, to tuck Olivia in because she refused to go to sleep or to go to bed and cried her eyes out until we would come and kiss her goodnight and tuck her in, and then she would go to sleep. So Shelby, who's Chrissy and Walt's only child, she's in the middle. Shelby is just the kindest, sweetest child that you ever want to meet. She's the peacemaker. She would sit in the car when I'd take all three of the girls somewhere, and the Snaps would be on either side arguing constantly, fussing, fighting, because they fought like cats and dogs. And Shelby would be just, back and forth because she wasn't used to that. Walt and Chrissy were quiet. They never argued in front of her. Life was placid. She didn't have to fight anybody for her toys or time or attention or anything. So she was just a happy little thing that, every time we had races, she would run, and she always, 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 and might still do the thing. I just haven't seen her run lately. Have her eyes straight up toward God where she was running. Had no idea where she was going because she wasn't looking ahead. She was looking up. And we used to laugh just hysterically at her running. But was she giving all she got? She's our dancer. She's very creative. She started dancing when she was probably 5 years old. And she now is too old to take classes. So now she teaches dance 3 nights a week. That's sweet. But her girls now, she does all the choreography or most of it for them. She's won awards this past year. She got 2 choreography awards, and that was her first time ever doing anything like that. So she's always been a hard worker. She's like her mother. And I think the thing you can say about Shelby more than any is she has such a great sense of herself. She has such a great sense of who she is, what she wants, her goals in life, and she's very goal oriented. She will work till her last breath to achieve whatever she set out for herself. But in the same time, she doesn't lose her sweetness or her kindness or her compassion for others. Emily is our tomboy, sort of, I wouldn't even call her a tomboy. She just always gravitated toward guns, machetes, motorcycles, camouflage. She used to love, I thought she'd wear camo to her senior prom. That's how much she liked. She hated frills, pink and anything lacy or anything frilly. She liked to be dressed for comfort and dressed to move. She could probably outplay most boys in any sport you wanted to know. She had, and one of her best friends as she was growing up was Riley Phillips. And Riley had a crush on Emily. And she could take him, and he played football. She was a better football player probably than he was. And she was fat. She was just always the consummate, all around good girl that boys would just love because she liked the same things they did. I know. I mean, Libby dated a guy for a while, and he was putting a speaker in Emily's car, and he was in the trunk, and he raised the lid, and there was golf clubs, and there was a machete, and there was fishing pole, and there was something to do with the motorcycle because she rides motorcycles. And he said, boy, the guy that gets her is going to be one lucky guy because she likes the coolest things.
That's right.
And she did. She always. Olivia's our decorator. She has the most perfect sense of style and of herself of anybody I've ever seen, especially at her age. You can do something and she can come in and she can say, let me fix that for you. And she will go over and just do her arms around the 2 or 3 times, and it looks like you're in a totally different place. She's just got that gift. She is a hard worker. Anybody else can be sitting around talking, and she'll be up cleaning something up, wiping something up. She recently became engaged. She's getting married May the 4th, and she has picked herself out a guy they're so much alike. They're sort of like what you would refer to as old souls. They're like the little old married couple that have been married for 75 years, and they're both so in love with each other, and they have the same values, the same, they used to, when they were dating before they were in a long time, back in the first of their relationship, they would call each other on the phone and they would read their favorite passages out of the Bible to each other and talk about it and pray together. And I think all 3 of the girls, Emily has Dan, and he's the most perfect person for Emily. Their birthdays are real close together. They like the same things. He's a daredevil. She's a daredevil. Uh, pu- and he makes us laugh, and is always, he makes you laugh. You just feel like a different person when you're around the 2 of them because they just enjoy each other and everybody so much. They're both hardworking. She qualified a couple of years ago for air traffic control school, which is something a lot of people don't qualify for. And they narrowed it down real quickly, and she got to go. She moved to Oklahoma by herself with her other trainees that she didn't know from all over the country. And went to school out there for 3 months, finished second in her class, second in her class. Then was sent to Los Angeles was her airport she had to go to. She went out there by herself with her daddy, and he moved her out there, and they searched for apartments, and she went to work, and Dan came out, and after about a week, they decided they couldn't afford to live in Los Angeles, much less wanted to live in Los Angeles with all the things that were going on with all the homeless people, the drug addicts on the streets, and all the things going on. Gas, I think, was $7 a gallon when it wasn't that much here. Apartments were $1,300 for just almost nothing. It was going to cost her money to go to do an apprenticeship out there for 2 years. And so, much to our pleasure and happiness, they moved back home. But Dad's a pilot. Emily has gotten her pilot's license so she could fly too. They've had Luke. 'Cause I'm going to let you talk about Luke because you can tell Luke stories much better than I can.
Well, Luke is the first boy. We've blessed with 2 daughters, 3 granddaughters, and now approximately 9 months ago, Luke was born. And so we've kind of been concerned that his walking, maybe learning to walk, could be delayed somewhat because he's carried around every minute of the day. One of the girls always has him like a little doll, carrying him around.
And some of the boys too.
Yeah, some of the guys have been seen to carry him also. And but he is beautiful boy. He's just so sharp, and you can just tell that he's blessed with a great mind. His eye movements, he never misses a thing in the room. He's all the time trying to touch someone's face and reach for things, and he's been blessed, and we're blessed to have him. Can't wait for the next chapter, and which is now it's almost every week something changes. It changes fast. I know for this first year especially, and
He has 2 teeth now.
yeah, just in the last week or so, the second tooth has popped out, and he's just no greater.
And the child is going to probably expect to be someone to clap every time he sneezes because everything he does, it makes no difference what it is. We're all like, that's wonderful. But I didn't talk about Connor, and I need to talk about Connor. Connor is Shelby's friend, and he has got to be the most refreshing breath that you've ever encountered. He never meets a stranger. You can talk to him. If you've never laid eyes on him, you can walk up to him and start talking to him. He adores Shelby, adores her, and she adores him. And Shelby's real particular. And I sometimes, when they were younger, I would think, oh, Shelby, he's going to have to be really special to get Shelby's attention and hold it for a long time. Well, she's met her match with Connor. He is someone that can get your attention and hold your attention for a long time. He is really interested in football. He's graduates in December from UT, and he's planning on working for a pro team for a while, as maybe a scout across the country. And although I'm not putting words in anyone's mouth, I fully expect, I would be shocked if they didn't get married. I really would, somewhere down the road. But when I look back at Christy and Laura and the 3 girls, the thing I think that a mother or a grandmother wants for her kids or for her offspring is to find someone in life that will make them happy, that will love them and cherish them, and that will be someone that will have their best interest at heart in anything. Someone who loves God and shares their beliefs and shares their values. And I think all of these girls, all 3 of the little girls, have got a perfect match. And I think that comes back from the way they were raised and the values they were taught. Doug and Laura and Walton and Chrissy have taught and influenced and given these girls this principles that they can turn around when they grow up and apply it to their own lives. And I think you can give your child no better gift than that. I think that to teach them about God and God's love and God's mercy and eternal life, and to teach them to become adults and to make good decisions and to think are the things that a parent uppermost for a parent to do. And I think they have done that. And I have no doubt in my mind that Emily and Dan, Mason and Liv, and Connor and Shelby will in turn teach their kids the same thing. And it will just repeat themselves. And I think that in this journey that we've been on and this crazy, amazing family we seem to have all of a sudden that just keeps growing, that's one of the best gifts of all, is to look at them and see how they've grown and matured and think, golly gee, we had nothing, and to be even mildly responsible to produce these children, and they have children, is just such a blessing.
We have no idea, or had no idea, of course, what we were even doing. We weren't much older than what some families have siblings and age differences. They were just born. Janis was 18 years old, was 19.
That's why I'm such a young great grandmother.
And so we really didn't know what we were doing at all. We weren't much more than just an older brother and sister to these kids, because we were just whenever they would go bike riding, we wanted to do stuff like that. We wanted to do kids stuff too, just like them. In some ways, usually there's a bigger age gap, and so we weren't much more than kids ourselves, and to absolutely not know anything about parenting. We've been so lucky and so blessed that it's turned out like this, and they've all done such a wonderful job with their children, and it just continues to hand down each generation, and it's just unbelievable.
What's that else saying? Even a blind squirrel will find the occasionally, and I think that you can attach that to us. Even though we were blind squirrels,
we were so lucky. Yes, I mean,
I can look back at the kids we graduated with that are our age now, and a lot of them, in fact, I would say close to 75% of them are on their second or third marriages. And we are certainly in the minority because we've been married 57 years. And that's almost unheard of.
We've had lots of ups and downs.
That didn't mean we didn't come close occasionally like that. It's funny when you get older, you feel your own mortality, I think, and things that used to be so important to you aren't important anymore. You find out what's really important. And a good family, good roots, good memories to sit around on the porch and rock and think about are what's really important. It's not the $50 grocery bill instead of a $20 grocery bill, or a car that occasionally you can push on the gas and even the windshield wipers still work. And softballs that when you throw them in, they really go in and they don't go back out behind you. Really, they do that sometimes in some games.
They're so capable and adhering to their own thoughts, and they know what they're doing.
They certainly don't need anything from us.
I don't worry about any of them. They know what's good.
And
they're on their right path.
Yeah, I agree. I think we did good. Even in ignorance, we did good. Do you think?
I know we did.
Yeah.
You can check us out at morethanmemoriestn.com or call us at 865-414-3954.